we're going to start to have new tools to slow, stop, and reverse aging.
I think, muscle is the currency of aging. The idea that we, have this software that kind of gets gummed up as we get older, but there are ways to sort of reset it through various strategies around longevity is really intriguing to me because, when I look at the common age-related diseases, they all have common mechanisms, right? Inflammation, oxidative stress, changes in the microbiome that all impact that, hormonal dysregulation, mitochondrial dysfunction. And you sort of start to look at the root causes of all this, toxin overload and an accumulation of all that. Those just seem to me to be the sort of low-hanging fruit to kind of work on to affect the ravages of aging. And a lot of the things that influence those are what we call the exposome, which is what are your genes exposed to? When you're talking about how do we modify gene expression, epigenetics, your exposome includes everything from the air you breathe, the water you drink, the thoughts you have,
the altitude you're flying at,
the altitude you're at, the microbiome is in your gut, to the food you're eating, the amount you exercise, whether you are loved or not loved. I mean, they're all things that are affecting these things in real time. So the question is, in your research on longevity and in life force, what did you come up with that were the sort of the key anchors that people need to focus on to improve the quality of their health, to add more life to their years and more years to their life?
Well,
because at the end of the day, people listening, like, what's in it for me? Like, how do I?
So listen, no surprise, Mark. It's everything you've been teaching and talking about and writing about for quite some time, and you are definitely the guiding light.
I'm the loudest voice, maybe the most annoying voice.
So, listen, I think it's very clear that, first of all, people should have hope that there are incredible technologies in development right now and incredible therapeutics. I'm involved with a number of companies I've co-founded that are doing things. We can talk about those. And your job is to live long enough to intercept all these technologies. And there are things you can do right now. And I think about them as the fundamentals. Number one, sleep 8 hours. If the body could have evolved to do as well in less than 8 hours, it would have. While we're sleeping, we are sitting ducks. And so a species of hominids that could sleep for 6 hours and do as well would have outcompeted everybody else who sleep 8 hours. So for me, that's obvious. Number two, it's what you eat. Eliminate sugar is first, second, and third in the list, and then whole plants. It's the work that you and Dean Ornish talk about. I just try and do my best. I'm not a saint, but I just try and remove all sugar. The way I do it is I don't buy it at the supermarket. If it's not in the house, I can't eat it. When your willpower is weak, don't have it there.
That's what I always say. If there's Chunky Monkey in the freezer, I'm done. Like if I have a bad day and there's a pint of Chunky Monkey, there's no holding me back. But if it's not there, I'll feel depressed for a minute, and then I'll go back to my room and read a book.
Exactly. 100%. It's drinking 2-3 or more liters of water per day. It is exercise, and you and I both are, I try and get my 10,000 steps in every day, and I try and do at least a lightweight workout. I'm not going to bench a new record, but I'm using free weights to keep muscle tone. Muscle is one of the highest correlations with longevity.
Unbelievably great that you said that, because I think, muscle is the currency of aging. And as we age, we lose muscle, and muscle is where our metabolism is when it's lost, we replace it with fat, which generates inflammation and oxidative stress and tanks our good hormones like testosterone and growth hormone, and raises our bad hormones like cortisol, all of which accelerate aging. So most people don't think about muscle as an organ. They don't think about how to preserve muscle, create better, efficient muscle, more highly functional muscle, more mitochondrial intelligence and function. Those are really, to me, some of the most important things with aging. And so, there's really two aspects that I hear you talking about. One is sort of the basic foundational things we know about how to actually upgrade your life and upgrade your biological software through lifestyle. Yeah. And then there's all these really extraordinary techniques, which are gene editing techniques, which are using various sort of innovative compounds to affect some of these gene expression patterns to things that I don't even probably know about that you've uncovered that are being explored, whether it's things like NAD or whether it's things like things that help regulate the economic factors, whatever those are. There's a lot of that going on. So I think the basic stuff people have a pretty good handle on. It's sort of the obvious stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of other things I just want to hit on. Mindset and attitude is probably one of the most important things. Mm-hmm. It's if you think you're going to die, you can will yourself to death. Who do you hang out with, right? Are you hanging out with people at the very end of their life, or you hang out with people who are youthful? Your mindset is so fundamentally important. And do you have a vision? Is the vision for the years ahead of you bigger than the vision for the years behind you? I mean, that's fundamental.
Yeah. It's
fundamental,
so
right? I'm more
it's
excited to be alive now than I ever have. And the projects I have are going to keep me going for the next few hundred years. So I'm super pumped about that.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's really true. When you look at meaning and purpose, it actually directly correlates with longevity. And optimists live longer, even if they're wrong. And I actually spent a lot of time this last week with a 99-year-old man who is brilliant, still working. I said, so what are your interests? He said, well, I'm interested in longevity. And he was 99 years old. He's telling me about the projects he's working on, the movies, the films he's making. It's really stunning to me to see someone that age be so engaged in life and joyful and committed to his friends and his community and his family, active. I mean, I was like, wow, that is just really remarkable. You probably know him, Norman Lear. He's just an amazing guy.
Oh, yeah, I love Norman Lear.
I'm just like, to be able to be that up close and personal with him and hear him talk about his life and his stories, but also talking about what he's dreaming about for the future. He's dreaming about the future. And that's pretty exciting to me.
There's another category of what you can do right now that's important. And I jokingly call it not dying from something stupid.
There you go.
But it's really important.
I call it how to die young as late as possible.
Okay. So here's the realization. All of us are optimists about our lives, about what's going on inside our body. We think we're fine. We're great, moving along. We're rushing to work and to vacation and spending time with our families. And that's all awesome. But we actually have no idea what's going on inside our bodies until you end up with a pain in your side in the hospital, and the doctor says, listen, I hate to tell you this, but whatever it is. And so this is the work that I had done early on in human longevity, and really we've taken it the next level with a platform called Fountain Life. We talk about Fountain Life in the book. But it's the notion that every year I go for a digital upload. I go to HLI, Human Longevity Inc., or Fountain Life, and I do a full body MRI, head to toe, brain vasculature, a clearly coronary CTA that uses AI to look for soft plaque versus calcified plaque. Calcified plaque is safe. It's the soft plaque that can rupture that you have to worry about.
Yes.
DEXA scan, my genome, my microbiome, my omics and so forth. And my goal is two things. Has anything changed in the last year I need to know about? And is there anything, so first of all, it's given me a baseline of this is where my body is. Like originally when I first did it, I saw I had a large aortic root where the aorta enters the heart. Oh, and it was is that dangerous? Should I be concerned? But then after doing it 4 or 5 times, it didn't change. That's just me. That's just normal for me. But we have found in like 14, 15% of people who've come through it, and these are all relatively wealthy, who can get any health care they want, who are typically in their 50s, 60s, 70s. 2.5% have an aneurysm they didn't know about. 2% have cancer they didn't know about. And all in all, I think the number was like 14 or 15% have something that they need to know about that's going to impact their health. And so that's my, wear your seatbelt, get yourself uploaded every year. And if you find something, take action. People say, I don't want to know. And I call bullshit. Of course you want to know, because
Yeah.
you can do a lot about things right now.
Absolutely. I think what you're talking about is really important, Peter, because what you're talking about is sort of a host of diagnostics that often are not something we would get in our traditional doctors. Hopefully the prices are going to come down so we can get them. But, there's a lot of imaging, a lot of diagnostics that are great, but then there's a whole layer of things that doctors aren't looking at. And I see this all the time, with people who are coming to see me for functional medicine. There's subclinical changes that happen, and you can detect changes in your biology and physiology decades before you ever get a symptom or before you get diagnosed with the disease, whether it's insulin resistance that you can see early on by looking at insulin levels after a meal, or fasting insulin, which is the first thing to go up way before your blood sugar goes up, or whether there's low-grade autoimmune disease, or whether your microbiome's off, or you have nutritional deficiencies, or your mitochondria aren't functioning.
Exactly.
You can start to see these things, and it's really just like a tune-up. They're not quite diseases yet, and then traditional medicine just hasn't had a way of thinking about this because it's really complex. And what's, I think, emerging, and what you're finding, Peter, is that there's this emerging field of omics revolution, which is, when you think about the number of data points that we get when you go to the doctor, you get like 20, 30, 40, 50 lab tests maybe. There's literally tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of things you can measure, most of which we're ignoring. Like David Furman at Stanford has looked at the throughput analysis of literally thousands and thousands of molecules around inflammation, which are those ones that relate to aging and chronic disease. And they're things you've never heard of before. They're things your doctor never tests for, that aren't a lab requisition, but are the most important things that we can be measuring to look at long-term inflammation and aging. So I think there's a whole host of things that we can start to look at. And from a functional medicine perspective, that's what excites me, because I see these things and I can then see the changes that happen. I can see the changes in biology that happen. And I've noticed in myself, I've literally kind of changed my biology and how I posted a picture recently of when I was 40 and when I was 60 in my body, and it's totally different. I was sort of like skinny fat back then. I was eating more carbohydrates. I wasn't overweight, but I didn't really have much muscle. And, look at me now, I look like 20 years younger, but I was 20 years younger than that picture than I am now. So it's like really it's quite staggering what you can do once you begin to understand these things.
Yeah. And there are two reasons we haven't done this in the past, maybe three. One, we couldn't before. We couldn't measure it. We didn't even know it was there or measurable, but we now do. And second, it's getting cheaper and cheaper all the time. But the third is that no human physician could ever deal with the amount of data we're talking about. It's a massive amount of data.
No.
And it's really the use of machine learning algorithms that are helping us understand the patterns, understand what it means. And, I think it's going to become, in the next 5 years, malpractice not to do a diagnosis without AI in the loop, just because.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's like I've seen literally millions and millions of data points on tens of thousands of patients, but I'm one guy, and I've seen patterns and correlations and things that no one has described before, and yet I know are true because I see them over and over again, but nobody's really kind of described it in the literature, and I think that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg of what's really going on when we begin to look at these things. So that's what's sort of exciting was we begin to look at the longevity perspective. We get to look at how do we start to do diagnostics differently, not looking for disease per se, but looking for sort of variations from optimal function and health.
So that's what we've done at Fountain Life. We have, by the end of 2022, we'll have a dozen centers set up in Dubai, in India, in the UK, in Toronto, and about 10 in the US. We're at about, anyway, we're doubling in the 2022 timeframe. And we basically digitize you and upload you into the system where we can understand what changes have occurred since last time. And that's part of what Fountain Life does. The other part is performance and recovery. It's what are your goals? Is it muscle? Is it obesity? Is it, energy levels? And we help direct you in our programs that way. But then there's a regenerative medicine side that is important because the regenerative medicine arena is growing tremendously. But we've built something called Fountain OS, which is an app that allows you to upload the data into your app, but it allows you to provision these things wherever you are. So if you don't live in the city where there's a fountain center, we have identified the imaging centers and facilities in Schenectady or in Des Moines, where you can get all of the tests put together and uploaded to the system, independent of where you live. And then the fun part is we have something called Fountain Health, which is health insurance business. So, health insurance, it pays you after you have disease and after you get
Right.
treatment. But what if instead health insurance was the opposite, which is we're going to provide you all of the imaging that Fountain Life does for free every year to catch disease at the very beginning and prevent it in the first place. So it's
Wow.
insurance that's going to be for self-insured companies initially, but it's about giving all of your employees all of this extensive testing as part of the insurance package for free to prevent the disease in the long run. So Fountain Life is doing great and super pumped about it.
So it's basically these clinics where you can go and get a range of different assessments and therapies that assess where you are now, where you are in the deviations in your sort of longevity track, and how to actually change those back to a younger biological age using a combination of lifestyle supportive therapies, functional medicine, regenerative therapies that are all out there now, and being able to incorporate as in real time as new therapies come online. When we hit longevity escape velocity, we'll be able to actually get to take advantage of that, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is. We also have a very limited, what we call our EDGE program. So as you well know, there's a lot of open investigational new drugs out there on the cutting edge, like rapamycin, like total plasma exchange, and so forth. So we give a small number of our Fountain Life members the ability to participate in these research protocols.
We're seeing life expectancy go down, particularly in this last year of COVID, where we saw it go down for the average person probably 1+ years. And if you're African-American, Hispanic, is up to 3 years of decrease in life expectancy. And at the same time, we're seeing an explosion of longevity science that's helping us understand the causes of aging, how to extend life, how to improve quality of life, how to stop the ravages of aging. And we're learning all kinds of new tools, techniques, and technologies, but there's a big mismatch there. So can you talk about, one, why we're seeing this increase in earlier and earlier deaths, or a decrease in life expectancy, and why at the same time we're so optimistic and hopeful about the future of longevity science?
Absolutely. And I think there's nothing that's more valuable to all of us and our families than healthy years. And let's define longevity in the first place. The average age of hominids back 100,000 years ago was probably in their late 20s, right? And then it expanded during the Middle Ages into the early 30s, and then 100 years ago it was in your 40s. Today it's in their late 70s. And I like to think about the fact that I don't believe humans were, on the whole, designed to live past age 30. We would have a baby by age 13 before there was birth control. I mean, seriously, before, you'd go in puberty and you have a baby. And by the time you were, 27 or 28, your baby was having a baby. And before McDonald's and Whole Foods, before food was abundant, the worst thing you wanted to do to perpetuate the species was take food out of your grandchildren's mouths. Yes. And so that was very much reality for what we evolved during. And then all the diseases of older age, cancer, heart disease, dementia, even when aneurysms take people, the wear and tear of the body, all of those diseases were never selected against if you didn't get it past age 30. So we're in optimal health in our 20s and 30s. And then we start the ravages of old age. And what's interesting, and I think you know this as much or more than I, that the conversation around longevity, and I'm going to define it more as age reversal, like how do we slow aging, stop aging, even reverse aging, which would have been a really crazy conversation to have had even 5 years ago, is now become the conversation du jour in the medical community and in the venture community. And there's more people thinking about and working on it. And so I personally believe, and hopefully at the end of this conversation, you'll believe, or others will, that we're about to go into a renaissance of health. We're about to massively disrupt the health industry, reinvent it, and start to
Amen.
add. Yeah, amen to that, right? Of course, you and I are both on carrying the signs around. Vive la revolution! Let's reinvent this
Totally.
crazy, insane system, which is so moribund. Anyway, but I think this decade we're going to start to have new tools to slow, stop, and reverse aging. And I'm convinced myself from the people I've spoken to. I don't know. When I was in medical school, I didn't get a chance to watch much TV, but I remember watching. I would watch Star Trek once in a while. That was sort of like my. If I had a little bit of time, I'd watch a Star Trek episode, and that was like the way the world
Dr.
should be.
Spock with the spicorder, right?
Yes,
tricorder.
Yes, exactly. But I remember watching one television show on long-lived sea life that species of like bowhead whales could live 200 plus years, and the Greenland shark could live 400 or 500 years, and sea turtles could live equal. And I was like, if they can live that long, why can't we? I mean, I was like kind of pissed and perplexed at the same time. And I made the decision it was either a hardware problem or a software problem. And that we were going to start to understand how do we change our software, or how do we change our hardware? So that's the frame that I have. Yes, we've had some recent decreases, and a lot of the increase, as you well know, in average, and the word average here is the key part. Average life expectancy has been the massive reduction in childhood mortality and the ability to deal with diseases early.
Clean water.
Clean water. Oh my God.
Sanitation.
Half the disease burden of the planet is due to unclean drinking water. It's crazy. Knock that domino over. So I don't think the recent gains in longevity are really the kinds of gains in longevity that I'm working towards.
It was the first hurdle we had to overcome, which was deal with the bad water and infectious disease, and we did a good job at that. But now we're looking at the aging process, and as I began to look at it over the decades, it's really clear to me that what most of us see as aging in this country is abnormal aging. It's biological processes that have gone awry, that are really dysfunctional states of biology. And then if we learn how to work with biology to optimize those states, whether it's inflammation or oxidative stress or changes to the microbiome or hormones or brain chemistry or your structural system tissues, you can really stop and even reverse the phenomena that we see as aging in this country.
For sure. But even doing that, the question becomes, can we all get to 100 healthy? Can we get to 120 healthy? And what's beyond that, right?
Yeah.
And I'm working on both sides of the equation. A number of the companies I have and the work that I'm doing, this book that Tony and I have worked 3 years on, Life Force, is really around increasing your vitality, your energy, avoiding the ravages of obesity and diabetes and heart disease and so forth. And there's incredible new technologies on the horizon. In phase, we looked at all of the stuff in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials. And then there's the basics: diet, sleeping, and exercise, which and we so don't want to spend our time doing. But we must. So how do we take this a piece at a time? There's an interesting, let me start with a big exclamation point on something that was a big insight in writing this book.
Yeah.
And
the book is called Life Force. It's out now. You can get it anywhere you get books.
Yes.
It's a very thick tome, like War and Peace, but it's your life. And if you want to put more life in your years and more years in your life, this is the book you should get.
Thank you. And it's written in a way that, read section 1 and then you can cherry pick if you're focused on heart disease or dementia or, inflammation or, cancer, go read the chapter on that. It's a look at all of the everything that's been approved or what's in phase 2, phase 3 clinical research that will be approved in the next few years. It's all really hard science in a very understandable fashion. The goal of this book is to give you hope for the future, to give you a roadmap of what you should be doing now and what you should be looking for, right? It's a roadmap for a longer, healthier life. I mean, I'm looking for myself, and people may think it's insane, a multi-100-year lifespan. But, if I shoot for that and I get 120 or 150, well,
I think you're going for the multi-hundreds. I was just going for 120. I feel like I'm kind of falling behind here, I'm just trying to get with the program. Multi-hundreds. I didn't even think of that.
There's a couple of things to think about. First of all, there's a concept called longevity escape velocity, which you're familiar with. Aubrey de Grey, Ray Kurzweil have spoken about this. And that the notion is that as science is beginning to understand why we age and why we don't have to, and as science is making more and more breakthroughs in the underlying diseases, there is a moment in time where for every year that you're alive, science is extending your life for more than a year. And that moment in time is called longevity escape velocity. When I asked Ray Kurzweil, Ray's brilliant. He's passionate about this area. He's my co-founder at Singularity University. He wrote The Singularity is Near and has written extensively about longevity. I said, so Ray, when do you expect we're going to hit longevity escape velocity? His answer was in the next 12 to 14 years. Which is
so basically what you're saying is if you can survive 12 years, you can live forever? Is that the idea?
That's his comment. I'm not going to back that up. But then I went and spoke to George Church, and I said to George, and George is professor of genomics at Harvard Medical School. He's brilliant. One of the early people across gene therapy, CRISPR. He's created 24 companies in 24 months. Would never bet against George. And I said, when do you expect we'll see longevity escape velocity? And he gave me the same answer. He said, the next 12 to 15 years. And so, but that's crazy, right? So we'll come back to that in a moment. What are the implications?
So you think we can make it to our early 70s, Peter? You and I will be in our early 70s then.
I'm shooting. I think we'll be all right. I'm definitely shooting for it. Here's the realization that we have just in the last 10 years, and you know this so well, the unveiling of CRISPR and all the different modalities of CRISPR and of gene therapy and of reading, writing.
Explain for people what CRISPR is, because I don't think people understand what that is.
So you can think of we have 3.2 billion letters in our genome that comes from our mother and 3.2 billion letters that comes from our father. And over the last 25 years from the Human Genome Program and Celera, we've developed the technology to read that genome, to actually read out what are the 3.2 billion letters that shape you. It's your genome. And reading your genome is useful. But what we've now done, and the technology called CRISPR, I won't accurately, it's an acronym for clustered repeats is the CR in here. But it's a technology derived from bacteria that were using this technology to protect themselves against bacteriophage, viruses infecting the bacteria. Long story short, it's a tool for being able to accurately edit your genome. So in the same way that Word allows you to read a document of all of the letters and words, 3.2 billion letters in the book of your life, CRISPR is the way that you can actually edit it accurately. And so the ability to read your genome and edit your genome and write your genome, and then a new technology called gene therapy comes along, which is the ability to actually use a virus as a robot to inject into the cells you want a specific gene. So it's like being able to inject into the book of your life a paragraph where you want it to say something. Anyway, these are incredible tools that are giving us the ability to not accept what we're born with, but to begin.
So if you have a single gene mutation, like let's say Huntington's chorea,
or thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, right?
Right. You can actually edit those genes to actually change the proteins that are produced that change the course of that person's life.
And what's incredible is it's not a treatment for these genetic diseases. It is a cure. It is like one and done. You're cured. And so Editas, a company started by George Church out of Boston, has a CRISPR treatment to cure a form of genetic blindness. And so a person's born with this particular genetic mutation, they're blind, an injection in the back of the eye, and they can see again. They're cured. It's biblical in nature. It's incredible stuff. So, but it's interesting. So now the question is, if you have these 3.2 billion letters when you're born, and when you have it when you're the same 3.2 billion letters at age 25, when you got all your musculature on the beach or you're in a bikini, you look great, you feel great, and then you have the same 3.2 billion letters when you're 80. Why don't you look the same?
That's a great question.
What is it? Why aren't you? I mean, I'm running the same computer code. Why am I looking different?
Why is the software output different, right?
Yeah. And so this is fascinating. This is the work that was best explained so far by Dr. David Sinclair, also at a Harvard Medical School, who wrote a book called Lifespan, which is amazing. I think Lifespan and Life Force are two books that will go hand in hand.
He must know something about aging because he's like 50-something. He looks like 12.
I tell you, I
don't know what's up with that. I love David.
He's my poster child. I'm running. He's when you're in a marathon and there's somebody that you're pacing yourself against. He's the guy that I'm like, I've got to pace myself against David. He does. He looks like he's 30. And his you write in the book, in the chapter, we have all these heroes in the book. David Sinclair, we say, David's got two numbers. He's 53 in chronological age, but his biological age by aging clocks is like 35 or something like that. Yeah, and he looks
amazing. Well, I did mine. I'm 62, and did a few years ago, but it was 39. So
amazing.
It's possible. Yeah.
It is possible. Yeah, I'm tracking. I'm 60, and I'm tracking in my mid-late 40s. My goal is to get down to a David Sinclair level of my mid-30s. And then I feel like, I feel like I'm 28, but I have sort of the emotional maturity of a 9-year-old, but that's a different story.
Oh, no, I think you're good. You're curious. You're in wonder all the time, and awe, which is actually a trait you should never give up.
I don't ever want to
about you most, Peter.
So let's go back to the question. If you have your same genome at birth at 25 and 80, what's going on? And so it's a concept called the epigenome, epi meaning above in Greek. And it is, in fact, the way that your genome is controlled. So what's going on at birth at age 25 and 80 plus, as you know, is not all your genes are turned on or all your genes are turned off. So your epigenome controls which genes are on and which genes are off. And so in your youth, you've got many more genes turned on to create the proteins in your skin. And as you get older, some of those genes turn off, and they should be on. Genes that are on that should be off, and genes that are off that should be on. And that is what's thought to account for the aging process. And so let's double click on that, because there's a very interesting construct and rationale of why that occurs. And I find it one of the most, when I'm on the stage talking about aging, I want to convey this because it helps people understand what's going on. So it turns out that we have a set of 7 genes, which are our sirtuin genes that generate the sirtuin proteins. And these sirtuins control which genes are on and which genes are off. It controls the epigenome. But these sirtuins also are responsible for DNA repair. Mm-hmm. And I want you to imagine that your 3.2 billion letters are the piano keys on the piano. And you're playing the piano. You're the sirtuins that are determining which keys should be played and which keys should not be played. And early in your life, you've got this thing on the side of you, like this clock you have to repair. And early in your life, the clock is doing fine and you're not distracted by repairing it. But as you get as the pianist, as you're continuing in life, you're playing the right keys, you're pushing the right ones and not pushing the wrong ones. But as things go on, you have to repair this clock more and more, and you're being distracted. Yeah. So you're trying to keep the clock repaired at the same time you're trying to play the right keys, and it becomes more and more difficult. But then there's another part of this, which is that these sirtuin proteins are powered by NAD in your cells. And as you get older, your NAD levels, sort of a energy currency, if you would, in the cells, your NAD levels drop by half. So all of a sudden, as the pianist, you're spending more and more of your time doing repairs, and having less and less energy to do the whole thing, and you become distracted, and the epigenome regulation of your body falls apart. So what David believes he has been able to demonstrate, and we talk about this in the chapter on David Sinclair, and I wrote in another chapter I wrote on longevity, that he has discovered that using 3 out of the 4 Yamanaka factors allows him to reset the epigenome in the living cell.
And that's a big mouthful. What's a Yamanaka factor?
Yeah, what's a Yamanaka factor? I mean, it's interesting. Can I get one off the kitchen counter?
Yeah.
So a guy, Dr. Yamanaka, Nobel laureate, discovered that you can take a differentiated cell, a skin cell, a nerve cell, a heart cell, a liver cell, whatever it is, and return it back to its pluripotent state. What does that mean? When we're born, we have like one cell, like the fertilized egg, and that grows and grows and grows and eventually differentiates into all these different kinds of cells in your body: your skin cell, your bone, your muscle, your heart, your nerve, your liver, your kidney. And all those cells have the same genome. But again, it's which of those genes are turned on and which of those genes are turned off determine what kind of a cell it is, what its function is. And we've heard of stem cells, and those stem cells have the ability to differentiate into any one of these specialized cells. Well, Yamanaka determined that these four factors, these 4 genes, proteins, if you utilize them, you can turn a differentiated cell back into a pluripotent stem cell that could then, you could take it from a skin cell to a pluripotent stem cell and then make it a heart cell or make it a nerve cell.
Wow. So you can reverse the process of the evolution of the cell from its final form into its pre-existing state.
Exactly. And we'll come back to this in a little bit on the work of Dean Kamen, who's manufacturing or backup set of organs for all of us, which is insane. Hold on for that one. Long story short, David Sinclair, working with 3 out of the 4 Yamanaka factors, was able to reverse the age and publish this in December of 2020 on the cover of Nature. Reverse the age of the vision system of long-lived mice. So these mice who had gone blind with a whole set of age-related decrepitation of their vision system, their optic nerve, he was able to bring them back to an earlier state where they were fully functional. It's since been done with the heart of mice. And so the question is, can you get your body to go back to a state of, hey, this is what your body should look like. These are the genes that should be on and off when you're, instead of 60, when you're at 40 or at 30. And the concept is age reversal, which is extraordinary. I'm working on, Mark, right now, and when we did our walk, if we talked about this, I'm working on a $100 million age reversal XPRIZE.
Yeah. That's
I've
pretty exciting.
Yeah. I've raised about 3/4 of the capital for it. We launched a $100 million gigaton carbon removal prize that Elon funded. And
Yeah.
this is the next big one I want to do. Get teams around the world working on how do you reverse aging. In this case, we'll ask them to do 20%, 25%, 20 years in humans with a therapeutic that lasts less than a year. But there's serious
Wow.
conversations about this now.
What are the things that are on the horizon and from that sort of, other than the foundational lifestyle stuff, which is really all the stuff, we've been talking about forever, but it actually really matters, whether it's, relationships and community and meaning and purpose and eating whole foods and extras, all those things obviously are important. And then, there may be some new things around various kinds of supplements or NAD and things that are coming out. But there's a whole range of other things that people are exploring, whether it's, massive stem cell injections. People are doing 200 million stem cells IV. They're doing exosomes, ozone, hyperbaric oxygen. They're even doing blood exchange. I mean, there's studies in animals where you can basically hook up a young rat to an old rat and the old rat becomes a young rat. So there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. What did you find within Life Force that was the most promising among all those different therapies? And where should people think about?
Yeah, I'll share a few. And these are the ones that I know personally because I'm involved. So one of the companies that Bob Hurry, who's also a co-author, and I started, Bob's the chairman and CEO, and I serve as co-founder and vice chairman, called Singularity. We built the largest cellular manufacturing facility out there. It's based out of New Jersey. The company, if anybody is pregnant listening to this, you know that you can store your cord blood. But what Singularity does also is store the child's placenta. We receive the placenta in the facility. We take the cord blood, but then we decellularize the placenta and pull out of it the placental T cells, natural killer cells, and stem cells, and that's a incredible treasure chest of valuable cellular medicines and capability. So I think of this the placenta as the 3D printer that manufactures the baby. Every cell that becomes the baby has come from the placenta, and the placenta, we actually pay to throw it away afterwards. But I want you to imagine that when we mine the placenta for these cells, we have Bob Hurry says, listen, if your baby came with an extra spare set of organs, would you throw them away, right? And that's what I think about this. So Singularity is producing large supplies of very high quality stem cells and then exosomes. Again, the placenta is also very rich in exosomes, and exosomes are these small vesicles of growth factors that are pumped out by the stem cells. But then the other cells, the natural killer cells, for example, and this is what the company's current business that we went public on back in summer of 21, it turns out that the placenta is an incredibly protective organ for a fetus. If the mother has a viral infection, the placenta and the natural killer cells of the placenta protect the baby. If the mother has cancer, it's very, very rare that you ever get a metastasis to the fetus. It turns out that natural killer cells are the cells that protect you today as you're sitting there against cancer and viral infection. So what we've been able to do is take these most powerful natural killer cells from the placenta and then develop them and use them as drugs and infuse them into the body to augment your immunity. And we have incredible science data, some of which we release, some of which will be released. And so then same thing for T cells and CAR T cells, which you're familiar with. But then the ability to use stem cells. So one of the hallmarks of aging is that the stem cells in your body, and these cells are resident throughout your body, in your fat, in your muscle, other tissues. And these cells that are sitting there latent, ready to differentiate into muscle, liver, lung, kidney, whatever it might be. But your stem cell populations in your body can go down by 100 or 1,000-fold. So it's this ability to repair your body. The analogy that I love I don't know if it was Aubrey de Grey who first came up with this. He said, imagine you build a brand new mansion. And this mansion is amazing. It's beautiful. It's got, 30 rooms in it. And it's so much work to keep up. But you have a army of maintenance and repair people in the mansion. But as the mansion goes on, these repair people start to die and they start to go senile. And eventually the mansion goes into disrepair. And this is like the human body, where the stem cells are the regenerative agents. They're the repair agents that start to reduce in number 100-fold, 1,000-fold. And as they age, they become less capable. But what if you could augment the stem cells in your body from this really incredibly, this will date us in terms of our computer background, like the boot disk, the earliest software.
Yeah.
So that's fun. That's a super cool tech.
So basically the idea is preserve your placenta when you're born, and then keep it as a storage house for all these amazing healing cells that you can access it anytime when you get sick when you're older. Is that the idea?
Well, yes. And it turns out that the placenta, it becomes a universal donor. Placental cells are universal donor because they haven't been thymonized yet. If you imagine a surrogate mother who's not related to the child in any way.
Yeah, right.
But she doesn't reject the child, and the child doesn't reject her. And so the placenta's cells are a universal donor and recipient. So,
people are using like exosomes from placenta and those things, right?
Yeah, 100%. And Singularity is developing those products and going into IND, investigational new drugs. Idea of cells as drugs, very powerful. Another company, Vaccinity, which I'm very proud of, again, serving as co-founder and vice chairman. It's a company that realized there's a $160 billion biologics market out there. And it's the idea of using antibodies that you inject into your body, and those antibodies can go find a specific protein and knock it out. So I have high cholesterol. It's familial, it's genetic. High LDL, low density lipoprotein, and I don't like taking statins. That's my personal opinion. And but it turns out that there's this monoclonal antibody called Repatha against an enzyme in my liver called PCSK9. And PCSK9 in the liver is the enzyme that generates the LDL. And I think it's Regeneron makes this monoclonal antibody. They make it in a giant vat in New York. And every 2 weeks, I get this little self-injector, 5 mLs inject in my belly fat. And it's about $600-700 per injection. It's not cheap.
It's a lot.
For that reason, it's the last line of defense. But those antibodies I'm injecting into my body go to my liver, and they shut down the PCSK9 enzyme, and my LDL level falls beautifully in line. And it's kept me, really feeling healthy and safe. But it's expensive to have those antibodies created outside the body and into you and so forth. But so what Vaccinity, it's VAXXINITY is the name of it. What we've done at Vaccinity is been able to design a vaccine that you inject, once a year, maybe twice a year. And that vaccine turns your immune system into the producer of those monoclonal antibodies. And so you vaccinate yourself against this endogenous protein, this protein in your body against PCSK9. And so we're in phase 1 there, and phase 1 on a same typical target for migraines, a phase 2 for Parkinson's, and a phase 3 for Alzheimer's. So it's the idea of imagine being able to give yourself an injection once a year and protect yourself from ever coming down with Alzheimer's.
That would be amazing. Do you want to know my secrets for living a long and happy and healthy life? Well, all you have to do is check out my weekly newsletter, Mark's Picks, where I share my favorite tips for health, longevity, well-being, and lots more. Check it out and link below. So there's going to be kind of cool little hacks that we can use to somehow stave off some of the age-related diseases. But what you're doing a lot with this work on life force and longevity is actually going upstream to get to the root causes years before you'll ever get the problem.
Yes. So I'm one of the, remember we talked earlier about the sirtuins that are doing this dance between DNA repair and DNA regulation, and they're powered by NAD that's dropping in the cells as we age. And so one of the things you can do is supplement the precursors of NAD. And this is a lot of the work that's done by David Sinclair as well. And so I take NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide, that is converted to NAD intracellularly. And that helps to, at least in theory, I've not been measuring my NAD levels, but increase the amount of NAD in my cells to keep those sirtuins bouncing back and forth and keeping my epigenome properly regulated. Right. So there are things like that. I take metformin to reduce my blood glucose levels. And there's a whole slew of things. There's a number of trials going on. And I'm tracking all of these, age reversal therapeutics and companies out there.
It's interesting when you look at the metformin, for example. I remember the diabetes prevention trial, and it showed that, giving metformin helped to reduce the progression to type 2 diabetes from pre-diabetics, by a relatively good amount. But the lifestyle and diet were far exceeded the benefit of metformin. So, is it incremental only in terms of its benefit, or you think it has some other benefit? Because to me, it seems like if we just reverse insulin resistance doing the things that we know work, which is diet and lifestyle, that actually you won't need metformin.
Yeah. So for me, it's belt and suspenders. I am, I'm really focused in on my diet and my sleep and my exercise and my mindset. And I'm doing everything I can to maximize my opportunities to intercept the technologies that are coming our way. Mm-hmm. And it's a choice. Chunky monkey and sitting on the couch watching Netflix for 5 hours a day is a choice.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, no, that's right. I think it's interesting to try to sort through all these different technologies, whether it's lifestyle things, supplements like NMN or NAD, and what is the 80-20 on it? What is the 80-20? And I think that, by that I mean, what are the most leverage interventions that we can focus on now, given what we know? For people listening, could you help us sort of come down with what are the 80-20 on this? What are the 20% of things that are going to make 80% of the difference? And if we focus on those, we're going to be good. And then we can kind of micro tune the other things as the research comes on and we hit this longevity escape velocity.
There is so much data coming out, and this massive increase in information and stories and journal articles and such. I'll just share with you something that I'm pumped about. I built over the last couple of years a platform called Future Loop, and it creates a newsletter for me called Longevity Insider. You go to longevityinsider.org, and it's free. We scan 250,000 to 500,000 journals, newspapers, magazines, tweets every day, looking for valid, future positive semantic breakthroughs on converging technologies impacting health and longevity. So it is I get the top 15 articles every day on breakthroughs regarding health and longevity and age reversal. And we have built an AI on it that summarizes the article really well about what it is and why it's important. For me, it's about how do you keep, part of the mindset part is realizing, holy shit, that's happening and that's happening and that's happening. It's a realization that the amount that this area is massively exploding in a very positive sense. So, longevityinsider.org is you can go and get on, instead of all of the dystopian news you get every day from
Yeah.
everything else you read. Yeah.
Absolutely. So in terms of these things that you're most excited about, is it these gene editing things? Is it the stem cell work? Is it this sort of exosomes? I mean, what's sort of the thing that's sort of most exciting on the horizon?
I think it's all of these. I mean, we did 160 interviews in the book, and we look at, I think the gene therapies to be able to, we're all given a genetic lottery when we're born, depending upon our mother and our father, and there are things that you can do, and lifestyle changes which we should and must do, but the tools that are coming to attack the different hallmarks of aging, from stem cells and exosomes on one end to gene therapies to just even treatments for mitochondrial dysfunction. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm tracking as many of them and all of them. I'm lucky. Found Life as a platform is where I have a list of an incredible group of advisors and supporters who are the fiduciaries to help us identify and then say, this is scientifically credible. Let's watch this. Let's make this available to our members. And so I'm constantly tracking that. I mean, there's another technology coming out of total plasma exchange, right? Where you basically changing the oil in your car.
Explain that.
You take out so in our bodies, we're accumulating products of metabolism all the time, and our liver and our kidney should clear that, but it doesn't always. And so there's a couple of things happen. One, as you said, experiments done in what are called the Parabiosis experiments, where the circulatory system of a young mouse and the circulatory system of an old mouse were connected. And the young mouse got old and the old mouse got young.
Yeah.
And this is like, the vampire experiments. And it was like, what up? What's going on here? What's these factors in the blood that
you clean them out
in this blood exchange? And so two things came out of that. One is out of Harvard, out of Amy Wager's lab, came identification of a protein called GDF11. And GDF11 is a protein that you produce less and less of it as you age, and there are antibodies against it as you age. And so in mice, when you give GDF11, and we're just in the animal phase studies, the mouse reduces inflammation, it increases its circulatory capabilities. You get a lot of revitalization from GDF11. So it may be that GDF11 is the factor responsible for the rejuvenation of these older mice. So that's one thing. And so we write about GDF11 in the book. I'm an investor in a company called Elevian that is producing GDF11 or doing the research behind GDF11. But then these same scientists took these older mice and basically took blood out, spun out the cells, and put the cells back in, but with albumin and dextrose and saline. Basically, albumin, as you well know, is the major protein in the bloodstream. And your blood is a lot of albumin, a lot of salt water, and some sugar. And so they took all of the plasma out and replaced the plasma with fresh constituent parts. And that revitalized the old mice too.
Wow.
And so there is, in particular, reducing signs of dementia. And if you Anyway, so there's a lot of protocols going on right now. We're tracking that inside of Fountain Life. It'll probably become available in our Edge program. I look forward to trying it. And it's a notion of basically like changing your oil.
So what is it? Plasmapheresis? Is that what it is?
It is basically, yes, it's basically, again, you're pulling out 2 liters of blood, you're spinning it down, and you're replacing the plasma with albumin and dextrose, and it's a ringer solution.
So the theory is there's a lot of old crud, like kind of like space junk floating around in your blood that needs to be cleaned out, that can cause aging and inflammation and oxidative stress and all these problems. And that kind of exchanging your plasma or blood like this will actually help to improve your overall health. And I think a lot of doctors doing plasmapheresis and other things for chronic illness and seeing really significant benefits.
Yeah. And so there's just so many different, and I mean, we could spend another 3 hours, and maybe we'll do another session to actually dive down into another dozen targets. But it's extraordinary. I've never been more excited about disrupting the healthcare industry and extending the healthy lifespan. And there's nothing more important than that. I love the saying, the man or woman who has their health has 1,000 dreams, and the man or woman who does not has but one.
I think you're right, Peter. You're in this moment where the kinds of things you're talking about are not just disrupting aging and longevity science, but they're disrupting our whole way of thinking about chronic illness and subsequently our healthcare system.
Yeah.
And how we need to refocus on the science of creating health. Because what you're talking about, a lot of the therapies you're talking about are not necessarily targeted at a specific disease. They're targeted at mechanisms that are related to the degradation of our biology over time, that are really about optimizing the inherent functions of the body. So they're supportive and enhancing therapies. I think of the difference between antibiotics and probiotics. An antibiotic will kill a bug, but a probiotic will help your gut work better. And a lot of these therapies are much like that. They're not designed to be interfering or blocking a pathway as much as actually enhancing and optimizing the functions of your biology that degrade over time as we age. And as we have insults, I think a lot of the insults that we see are, because of how we treat our bodies. I got a body work the other day, and, below the neck, they're like, she said, look how your body's 30 years old. I'm like, yeah, it feels like 30 years old. I mean, I feel I'm actually more fit, more muscular, more in shape than I was when I was 30 at 62 almost. So that's possible if we understand the science of how to create health and how the body works. If you love that last video, you're going to love the next one. Check it out here.
And the way we teach it is treat the symptom, not treat the cause.
Yeah. Yeah, and so in aging, it seems like there's things that happen, and I want to get into why, but we see increase in inflammation in aging. We see a decrease